everyone, I'm Alana and you're listening to YChats, a podcast for young people by young people. Guys, sometimes I feel like mental health is a really hard issue to open up about because it might feel like there's still a stigma around it, or even that it's a really personal issue that you feel like maybe you can't open up about. But I just want to say, like, your friends are there to listen and be a support system that you can rely on. That's why when I decided today that I wanted to speak about mental health, I really couldn't think of a better person to speak to than my best friend, Colin Ebsworth. Hey, Colin.
Hey, Alana. Thanks for having me here. That was a very sweet intro.
Now, I've actually known Colin for almost 10 years now. And are you ready for the little hype up?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay.
Hit me with it.
Colin, the greatest person ever.
Okay, not too high. You started too high.
So right now, he's studying law. He's working, he's smashing the Perth comedy scene as a stand-up comedian, but not only all that, he's doing self-checks, checking in with himself to always make sure that he's maintaining his mental well-being. So I think that personally it's such a testament to both our friendship, but mainly to you and your personal growth that like you're even willing to come on today and have a chat about your experiences with mental health. So like first of all, just I wanted to say thank you.
No problem. No problem. I think it's something that a lot of people get weirded out by, but I've never really had an issue talking. So I'm happy to be here. It's really sweet of you to have me here.
Okay, so I don't really want to focus on like the negative stuff. I really want to talk mainly about like how you've grown and how you cope with your mental health and well-being, but we probably want to get like a little bit of context about how you were feeling and what made you recognize that you needed to change something.
Sure. So just to get people to understand where I was at relative to where I'm at now, because things are pretty good now. Like things are going really well and it took a lot of work. So I don't want to make it seem like I'm just a guy who kind of feels bad on Mondays. Things were not great for a very long time, but I traced it back maybe like 10 years when I met you. No. It was a bit longer than that, and it was a culmination of a few things that's taken me a long time to realize, but I'm very happy that I've managed to figure out where I'm at now, and I have a lot of things in check. But when we talk about depression or any anxiety, I mean, this is something that went back 10 years and went even longer. I mean, I remember I went to my first therapy session when I was maybe 19. And by the end of it, the therapist was like, oh, yeah, it sounds like you're an anxious person. And to be honest, I had never understood what anxiety was. I thought anxiety was like, oh, you get weird in crowds or something, which I guess to an extent it is. But the way she was applying it was like mind-blowing to me. So, I mean, this is like a long thing. When we talk about the stuff that I've gone through, it can be pretty heavy. We don't have to go into all the details, but I just want people to know that it has been pretty rough in the past, trialing a lot of different things and going through a lot of stuff. So I don't know, we can hit on those things and I'm totally happy to talk about them. I don't want people thinking that, because I'm a pretty cheerful guy, that it's been all roses and stuff. It is a lot of work, but I think everyone listening, especially those who are having maybe a tougher time, can potentially get to where I'm at or make things a little bit easier. Yeah.
So you were feeling depressed and anxious and all that stuff?
Yeah. I mean, it went through a few different things. I don't want to jump around too much, but what I've realized now is that there was a few traumatic events in my life that I hadn't properly understood in terms of the relevance and resonance they had with my own life history. And there's also a lot of genetic factors. Mm-hmm. And I feel bad because I really don't want to do it disjustice by not going into it, but I just don't have the medical background to understand it. But all I know is there's a lot of stuff that we get passed down that can skip generations or come from our parents. Mm-hmm. And it's that whole nature versus nurture debate, whether you have things that are inherent to you based on your genetic qualities or things that are taught. And for me, it was a combination of both and the way they came together. And I think that's really hard to understand for people when we talk about mental illness, because mental health, it's never going to be that A, B, or C thing. You're never going to fall neatly into things. I mean, I had diagnoses everywhere from borderline personality to bipolar to just like depression or episodes of manic. And each one, as I went through and figured out what applied to me and what didn't, I was able to get a little bit more of the picture a bit clearer. Mm-hmm. I feel like I've gone through a lot of the motions. So where would you like to start?
Well, like, what I wanted to talk about really is how you've grown and how you've learn to cope?
Okay, so I would say if we go backwards.
Yeah,
that might be a good way.
Yeah.
So right now I feel really good. I've managed to figure out a couple of things that have helped me out. For one, the mental checks and just checking in. That's something I want to start with, and it's a very easy thing that you can do. It just refers to your ability to see inside and just understand what's going on. I think the problem that people have is feeling anxious or depressed, which is a problem in itself, but not understanding where those feelings are coming from can make things so much worse. I mean, it's one thing to feel bad. It's another thing to feel bad and lost, and to not understand that. So the big thing that I've been working on is just understanding partially why. And when you can kind of get your head around that, it just takes the pressure off a little bit. I mean,
so how did you kind of figure that out then?
Well, I remember just through speaking to my therapist one day, I remember I was like, I told her I went out drinking on the weekend, and I was like, I just felt so bad today. And she's like, did you think that maybe drinking has something to do with that? And I was like, what do you mean? And this was like a light switch moment for me. She said that the symptoms of a hangover are the same as the symptoms of an anxiety attack because your body reacts to processing alcohol in the same way.
Oh, okay.
So you end up with the release of the stress hormone cortisol, right, which is something that we use in like a fight or flight response. So when we were cavemen, it was very useful. But for now, we're not really being chased by lions all the time, so it doesn't really have a place, but our body hasn't reconciled that because we haven't evolved past it.
Yeah.
That's a genetic thing that can come in. And also the way alcohol affects your body in terms of dehydrating you is exactly the same as you might have an anxiety attack.
Right. Oh,
So
I
those
didn't
kind
know
of
that.
things, yeah, those kind of things can work together. Stuff about like caffeine. I know for me that I figured out through talking with psychiatrists and therapists, I'm a very energetic person, and stimulants over like more than once every now and then I cannot handle. So stimulants like caffeine or Dexies, if you have medication for that kind of stuff, for me will send me absolutely off the walls if I have it too regularly. So understanding that makes things a bit easier. I can say midweek if I'm like really anxious out of nowhere, did I drink on the weekend? I find usually there's like a 3-day hump. So that kind of stuff is something really simple. I think it's really important to have a checklist.
Yeah.
I mean, this is stuff you can do on a day-by-day basis. If you're feeling down, you got to ask yourself, how are you getting enough sleep? For one, are you getting regular sleep? That's a big thing because regular sleep doesn't mean you can get 8 hours from a day, but if you're going to bed at 5 a.m. and waking up at 2 or 3, that's not the right amount of sleep. It's not the right time for sleep. It's going to send your body's cycle off, and you've got to understand that everyone has a certain sleep rhythm, and your understanding of that is really important. Everyone's a little bit different, but most people need 7 to 8 hours, and if you're not getting that regularly at the same time, your body will not be able to adjust effectively. You need to be able to drink water. Like if you haven't drunk water today and you feel bad, drink some water. Like right now, I know you're listening, pause it, drink some water, come back, you feel so good. Having a shower, doing a small amount of exercise, getting sunlight. Sunlight is so important. Oh my God. And a lot of people can't get it. I went over to Toronto to do some gigs for a while, and it was the middle of winter, and I thought the Canadians were joking when they said you need to buy vitamin D supplements, but they were not. And it was a big thing that I had to figure out, that you need sunlight. We are just walking around plants. They're a lot more complicated.
Yeah.
You need the sun. So those are the things I do to check in on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Some of the longer term stuff I have to understand is to do with like medication. So the checking in thing is something I do more regularly.
Yeah.
Medication was a longer process for me. And I don't want to say medication is good for everyone, but it has helped me a lot. But medication is a twofold, kind of has issues because it takes a while to kick in.
Right.
If you're on any longer medication, and by that I mean more regular medication, anything to do with anti-anxiety, so everything from like Zoloft, which I'm on, or like Prozac, or sertraline, or any of this kind of stuff will take a while to 2 to 4 weeks. No,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, 2 to 4 weeks is some of the quicker ones like Lexapro, and some of the longer ones, Prozac, will take a solid month. So it's not.
So it's not a quick fix.
Yeah, it's an investment. There are quicker fix, but those are short stop measures. So things like Valium, if you're a particularly anxious person, you can get prescribed. But that has certain repercussions as well. I mean, you can't drink. They're very easy to get a tolerance to, which was a situation I found myself in, and it was pretty difficult to swap that out with something else.
Yeah, I feel like that's something that definitely you need to speak to a doctor about.
Yeah, absolutely. And having a doctor in your corner, I mean, was a big thing for me. So I was on meds for a while and then had to go off because I had this psychiatrist who I just didn't click with at all. This guy I should have known. He had a South African accent. I should have known not to trust him. He was a funny guy, but like he just didn't get where I was coming from. And I don't want to rag on him, but I feel like he misdiagnosed me. And so I had a really negative reaction to medicine in the first place. He put me on lithium, which did nothing. Then he put me on some sleeping meds that reacted badly with that. And then we went to lamotrigine, and lamotrigine has a condition that can be potentially fatal where you get an allergic reaction to it. And I got that reaction, and he was like, "No, it's fine. Just keep going." And that was just bad. I really just didn't enjoy that. So I thought I'd just have to go natural, like no drinking or no caffeine or anything. And I'll have to exercise every day, which did partially work and got me to a functioning base state, which I was happy with. But it was the middle of summer, and so like you're going to be feeling good. And I remember I went to a GP that I had, and she was really lovely. And she said, "Okay, we're going to get you like a better psych." And it was just kind of out of the blue. But I was really glad she did, because it's one thing to get a GP or get on medication when you're in a down period. Mm-hmm. But the thing about medication is it can be really volatile when it's in that balancing, stabilizing phase. Yeah. And you can potentially make things worse. And for me, when I was down, that was a terrifying prospect, because I already felt atrocious. I mean, no one wants to be at the bottom of the well and then be given a shovel to get out. That doesn't make sense. So when I was up, I was kind of a little bit hesitant. I went, well, I feel like, okay, well, I don't need this. And I'm so glad that I went through with it, because she put me in contact with a psychiatrist who was a lot better, and asked me, a lot of really good questions, and just had a better understanding of where I was at in terms of these genetic factors that made me predisposed to stimulants, for instance. And he was able to put me on something when I was in a good state, which is really what I'd recommend to people. I mean, the process doesn't stop when you're good. The process is never ending to better yourself or to create positive change in your own life. So with the medication, I went to him. He was great. He made me understand things a lot clearer. It wasn't just a clear cut, you're on bipolar, you have this. He did a lot of really interesting things, talking about how I have a lot of stuff that I've inherited from my mother as genetic factors, but then there's also trauma as a kind of social factors that I brought in, and the way they were reacting was to create this kind of issues, and that medication could assist me in getting to a base state, but I was going to have to do a lot of the work. And that's what I found from medication. It will never be an instant fix, but also for a lot of people, it won't. It is the right thing to do. Yeah. Medication has let me see what I needed to fix and see what was wrong.
Yeah. I guess like if you're kind of struggling, it really just depends on you as a person.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is just your experiences and how you dealt with it. But
So like I said, it did take a long time. It takes a while for the meds to kick in, but also it takes a while to find the right medication. And this is something that I know was really hard for me. I didn't expect that. It was over a year before I found that. And even now with the medication that I'm on that I do like, then getting the doses right, because this medication gets me very energetic. It takes me back to where I was kind of when I was a kid, which I remember I first took it and I was just like shaking. I had so much energy, but it didn't feel unfamiliar. It felt like I was like, oh, I remember this. I'd been switched off for so long when I was like, I remember this. And as an adult, it was kind of a little bit, I don't know, it was a bit, I was like irritable all the time. And I thought, wow, this is crazy. As an adult, I'm barely able to kind of keep this together. As a kid, I would have just been off the walls. So that was really good. That let me get back to where I was and then figure out what I needed to fix. But then I had to get sleeping meds, and I had to change up certain sleeping meds, and some made me drowsy in the morning. So it was like I found the solution, and then I had to find something that let me use that solution. So it was a long process. So just for people, unfortunately, like I can't say it's going to be an easy fix for you, but it is something that has helped in the long run. Because over the year it's took, if you take that year over my potential, 80 years of life, that is such a short amount of time to get longer lasting stability and an understanding of where I'm at.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, definitely.
Yeah.
And so for you took medication and now that took you to like a base level.
Yeah, the medication let me see what was going on. And if I can put it in a way that has helped me understand it, about 10 years ago, I had a really awful thing happen with my mother. She had, again, mental health issues herself that my grandfather had. And you'll find, unfortunately, mental health can be so easily passed down. And there's a lot of things that can bring it out. I mean, she was in her 40s and had no signs of, mental health issues, and then had complete psychotic breaks as per her bipolar, which my grandfather had. And then when I was in high school, she had a bunch of episodes which culminated in year 12, and she attempted suicide, like again, for a multiple time. But this time she did it in a way that rendered her incapacitated, like physically and mentally. I mean, she was still kind of functioning, but it was a long process. And I remember I didn't feel sad at the time. I mean, I was dealing with TE, and I was like one of the only kids in my family to do TE. I had a girlfriend at the time who was just off the walls nuts. Like, this isn't a women thing. This is just her in particular. She was not good for me at all. And so I was dealing with this stuff, and I didn't get sad. I remember one day I was going to school, and I was talking to a friend, and I was like, yeah, I just don't feel it anymore. This is really good. And I was really happy with it. And then I guess that just progressed. And I liken it to like there's two train tracks running parallel to each other, and it felt like the cart I was on just bumped over to the other track, and the other track was one that was just kind of very numb and very dull, and these meds put me on the other track back where I was before, and it was bizarre. I mean, you can really feel it reworking your brain in a very good way. I remember I was like having memories that I hadn't. It was like there was a whole side of the house that I wasn't going into, but it was great. It was really good. And I was able to go back and go, oh, that actually was a bigger thing than I thought it was. I assumed because I wasn't feeling about it that it must not have been important. But in reality, it was so important that, a big chunk of my life had been kind of switched off because of it. So the meds let me see that a bit clearer.
And then so what was the work then that you had to put in?
So initially I noticed I was having anxiety relating to like women, especially whenever a woman would come into my life that I felt strong feelings for, it would really send me all over the place. And when I was 19, it became like a real issue because there was someone I was just crazy about. And I was like, I'm being nuts. Like I'm being a real, like just nuttabutter. And I was getting anxious all the time. So I went to a therapist, and she was really lovely. And that's when we first kind of figured out the anxiety thing.
Yeah.
Which is something really basic, but I hadn't even any clue about it. Then we worked through a bit more, and over the next couple of years, I would go to her. But again, I was doing that thing where I would wait until things were good and then stop, which I really wouldn't recommend doing. It's very hard when you're younger to afford a psych. I would recommend to anyone doing this, if you go to a GP and get a bulk billed so you don't have to pay, and then get a mental health plan.
Yeah.
They'll forward that to a psych. It gives you 10 sessions on a rebate, which means I was paying, I don't know, $130 and I would get $80-something back, which is a huge difference in your ability to do it if you're only going, once every 2 weeks or once a month. There's also a lot of free counseling options. If you're at university, you can definitely go to uni. If you're at school, you can definitely speak to your counselor. You don't have to go to, we had a chaplain and a counselor who was, really sweet. So you can definitely do that. And you can, look online, just be careful about what you're kind of reading online. Some of it is not really as verified.
Yeah. So you started going to a therapist.
So I started going to a therapist when I was kind of 19, and then I understood at least what was happening. I didn't understand why, but I understood what was happening. Then we went to the therapist. I noticed, the stuff with women was kind of because I realized my mum is my main source of maternal kind of presence, I guess, had been taken out of my life. So when women came in, it kind of threw a real spanner in the works, because then that presence was being put back in, but my body was like overcompensating mentally. I was like trying to, I wanted them too much. You can't force a girlfriend to be a mum as well. And I was just being weird. And I was like, this is so bizarre. And it got a little bit better every time. But with these meds, I was able to see what, like the effect that really had. And because I wasn't acknowledging the original root cause of at least that aspect of trauma, then I could never properly fix it. So for people experiencing stuff now, it is really important to go back and look through, and it can be a really hard thing, so I'd recommend doing it with a therapist. And you can say to them like, hey, I'm not feeling good, I feel like it's a cause of something, or at least multiple things. Can we look through some options? And then it's their job. If they're any good therapists, they'll be able to pick what was and what is not as much of a factor. I mean, you can be stressed from work, which is totally justifiable and totally understandable. But if you have, let's say, I don't know, hypothetically, a boss that is really berating or awful to you, that could be bringing up stuff from your parents, a teacher, a bully, a best friendship that went under, any of these things, and it's going to have a multiplying effect. So it's really, the boss is a bad person and they're not treating you right, and that dynamic is not good, but it's bringing up deeper stuff. And so it's important to understand what's happening in the present and the way the past is influencing that.
Yeah. So at the beginning of this conversation, you mentioned checking in with yourself and all of these things. Is this how you started to deal with that anxiety?
Yeah. If there's two big things I wish I could have done when I was younger, I mean, I'm happy I did them now, but I wish I could have told myself, it would be diary entries.
Yeah.
And
because that's something you tell me to do all the time.
Oh my
Every
God,
time I
diary
come to
entries
you
all the
and I'm
time.
like, I'm annoyed. You tell me to write it down. So how does that help?
Yeah, I thought diary entries was like, dear diary, today I went to the shops and blah, blah. And look, you can do that if you want. Like, there's no one saying you can't. But I didn't understand. I think for men who are potentially less intuitive than women, it can be difficult. Men tend to be more lateral thinkers, which is like A plus B equals C kind of stuff. So the idea that you talk about your emotions is kind of a trickier concept.
Yeah.
But when I started doing that, it was so useful. So I just open a Word document, get a page up, whatever, and just write down how I was feeling and what I thought about that. And it's so useful just to get stuff down, because if you're thinking in your head, it's very easy to get in a circular thought process where you go, this is happening. Why is this happening? I don't know. And I feel bad. Or because this is happening. And you kind of just go in the same thought. But if you can put it down on paper, it's down and you actually take it out of your brain.
Yeah.
And what's really useful, you write and you talk about how you feel. And then you can look back and you actually get a really good idea of how your brain is thinking. I mean, if there's a point that you'll keep coming back to, then obviously it bears some resonance or relativity to you. So what I would do, start writing down how I'm feeling. And then also I would go online and look at articles from, again, respectable sources. I would not go on like spiritscience.com, but I would go on like, Psychology Today or the New York Times or whatever, and look at ideas about, for me, attachment styles. Which is styles that you get from birth based on your primary caregiver's relationship with you. If you're distant, you end up with a distant, or you can be overattached, you can be secure, you can be anxious avoidant. There's 4 main types for that if you're interested, and I would recommend checking where you're at. But I would read about that, and then I would write in the diary what I was feeling in relation to that. Which obviously,
what do you mean?
So I read about attachment styles.
Yep.
And then I would just talk it through, but I would talk it through on paper. So I would, be like, oh, well, I remember like mum was really good to me. And then when she was away, there was obviously a big hole. So that could have affected that attachment style because I had a secure relationship with her. But then the floor being pulled out or the carpet being pulled out from beneath me would have changed the dynamic a lot.
Yeah.
So that was how I'd kind of talk through, and it was so beneficial. I could not believe how much better it was to be able to write stuff down. And also you get a really good chart of where your progress is at. You know what I mean? Like I can go through now and read stuff and be like, wow, I can't believe I was in that place. I'm so much better now. And it's good to get that sense of relativity.
Yeah. It really puts things into perspective of like how you were then and how you're feeling currently.
Yeah, absolutely. And for one of those things that can just help you in the day, it's so good because not only are you getting your feelings out, but you feel like you've done something, which is great. So for people that are feeling depressed especially or down, getting one thing done is so useful. So we can jump around to stuff that can help you during the day and like put a pin in this. Getting something done is just one of the best things. If you can do exercise, that's great. If you don't feel like it, then something as simple as taking a shower. I mean, that is really something good. Go outside, you can go for a walk, any of this stuff. You can read a little book. Just, you have to get out of bed, unfortunately. I learned about something simple the other day. It's like the minimalist rule or something, but it means doing the least amount of something every day, because mentally you can't say no to doing the least amount of something. I mean, I feel guilty every time I don't read, but the idea of, oh, well, I can at least read a page.
Yeah.
Like that would be, it sounds stupid to us to go, oh, I couldn't read a page. If you have trouble flossing, the example that I was given was like, just floss one tooth. You go, well, of course I can floss one tooth. Do you know what I mean? And then eventually after a couple of weeks, you'll build up a rhythm.
Yeah.
And the way your brain works is more on that, it takes routine.
Yeah, to create habits. And
yeah, something I picked up a while back was that the 3-day thing, and people talk about, to beat smoking or to form a new habit is 3 days. New understandings of neurology says that that's not right at all. I mean, 3 days maybe to get over really severe symptoms of like addiction, but the way your brain works, it takes closer to 3 weeks to 3 months to form a proper new habit. I mean, we have this idea that there's the white matter in your brain, which is all the neurons. And then there's the gray matter, which is the relationship between those neurons. And this might be getting a little bit too scientific, but they're realizing now that gray matter is a little bit more important. And that's the relationships between those neurons, because you can have all this stuff, but if it's not linking properly, it's out, and it takes a long time to form that up. So a lot of people feel disheartened, like after a week, I'm still smoking, I'm still this, that, and the other, and you've got to give yourself that chance to slow down or to build up. If it's a habit that's good, and it's a habit that's bad. You know, for instance, the idea of like cheat days for diets are so good.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people will start a new habit and then fall off and assume they've screwed up the entire thing. Which is not good. So for anyone suffering this kind of stuff, just be forgiving to yourself.
So to circle back.
Yep.
One of the things you said, most important thing, just to keep doing stuff. What else
if you can get a little bit done. And I found out, so the two things were journal entries, like diaries. Yeah. I think telling guys journal entries sounds a little bit better. Like mentally we can go, okay, I can get my head around that.
No more Dear Diary.
Yeah, no more Dear Diary, journal entry. You can be like, what's up, bro? Do journal. Another thing is meditation. Oh man, meditation was good. I remember the first time I had a guided meditation class, a girl from my cafe was like, hey, come to this yoga. And it was Kundalini yoga, which is, for anyone who knows, it was just me and 3 women over 60, but it was the bomb. It was so good. It was a lot of breathing, a lot of like, if you can't do this stretch, just sit down, which is so good. That's exactly where I'm at. And I remember I did this class, it was like an hour, and it was just a lot of focused breathing and inward introspection. And I went to a gig afterwards and I was just floating for like 3 days to a week afterwards. And it was clearly so much stuff in my brain had just like the cobwebs in the attic were just everywhere. And this just got it out a little bit. A lot of people have the idea of meditation as just sitting down and not thinking, which is not right.
No.
It is the ability to let things pass in your brain, because the brain is always going to be doing things. Mm-hmm. It's been doing things and thinking since we were kids. You're not going to stop that. And that's not the aim. The aim is the ability to not hold on to things, and learning to let that kind of stuff go was so useful. So I would really recommend some guided meditation. You can download the Calm app. I use that all the time. It's only like 5 or 10 minute stuff. You don't have to do an hour. That's great. I don't do an hour. That's nuts. If you can exercise and then do it, it's a really great little combo, little dream team. I used to run on the beach and then meditate for a bit and be that weirdo hippie guy in the dunes, just looking like he's like praying or trying to get a fly out of his eye.
So how often do you meditate then?
Meditate, you can do a couple times a week, or you can do once a week. It's totally up to you. But a big thing about meditation that I didn't realize, you can do it anywhere. Mm-hmm. So now it's like, oh, I'm waiting for the bus or I'm waiting backstage or whatever. You can shut your eyes and just take a couple of deep breaths and zen out big time. And that's something I never used to be able to do.
Even just like practicing like the art of being mindful.
Yeah. So I think that's good you brought that up, because mindfulness and meditation are like hand in hand. I think mindfulness is probably a better way to discuss it or to go about it, because meditation has all these weird connotations of, Buddhist philosophy or whatever. But mindfulness is the better way to do it. You're just being aware of what's going on in your head. So if you find that, things are frantic, there's usually a calmness beneath that you can kind of sort out, and coupled with a lot of other approaches that can be useful. If you're really antsy and stuff, like, you got to go for a run. The other day I felt atrocious because I had a coffee after 12, which is just dumb for me. I won't sleep until 3 a.m. and then I ran for like 30 minutes, which I never do, but I felt amazing afterwards. And a little bit of meditation really helped. So anyway, that's a useful thing that I figured out.
Yeah. So now that you've sort of recognized these things in yourself, and then you've got strategies in place to address them and help cope and deal with them as like you're living your day-to-day life. How has your life changed?
Well, now, I think about it. I had an anxious episode the other day. I just stayed up too late or like too many nights in a row, and I've been drinking or whatever. And I remember I was like, oh, really down. And then I woke up the next day and there was just that plateau at the bottom. Like, medication doesn't instantly fix everything, but it creates like a very solid bottom floor that stops you from being able to go even deeper, which was great. I woke up in the morning, the anxiety just wasn't there, which never used to happen, which is terrific. One of the best things I would recommend, this is something I wanted to bring up, is the idea of there's things in your life that obviously are going to help and there's things that are going to hinder.
Yeah. So this is something that you've actually spoken to me about personally quite often.
Oh, I love it. It's the only best thing I've ever had. The only good idea I've ever had.
So the way you describe it is emotional assets and emotional liabilities, correct?
Yeah. I remember I read a book about finance and it talks about money like that, and we look at our whole life like that in terms of what's helping or hindering our financial success, but no one does it for emotions really. And so I remember I was in a down phase. We talk about the last 10 years. It wasn't a steady line up. There was some big dips where I was worse than where I began. When I went over to Toronto, I was figuring out a lot of stuff, and it was not good. I wasn't on medication. I was not sleeping properly. I had no friends over there. I was doing a lot of drugs that I shouldn't have been doing, which I know I probably can't speak about, but we're being real. It's going to happen. And I can't handle those things, especially over a long time. But I came back and I was having like a lot of episodes, like really scary stuff. I was like hallucinating. And I remember I just felt off, and the doctor was like, do you want to go into a facility? And I was like, no, that sounds terrible, just from the experience I'd had with my mum for that kind of stuff. But it took getting there to make me realize like, oh, there's a lot more work to do. So in terms of the stuff, about a year later, I just wrote down all these assets and liabilities, and I realized that the column of liabilities, the stuff that was draining me, was so much greater. I mean, we're talking like 4 or 5 times the amount. We talk of assets. It was like, I have friends, comedy's going well, and, I can exercise. But the liabilities were like, I was living at home and I didn't have a good relationship with my siblings at the time. So living at home was really tricky. Mm-hmm. I had no money, and that was a constant stress on my life. I didn't have a job at the time. Comedy was still taking a big toll. The medications were not helping. They were hindering, because this is when I was on the older stuff. And so I just took the biggest one and tried to change that. So the biggest one was like, for me, finances and having a job. So I looked out for a job and I found one. I was really lucky. My best friend came back from Toronto, and then my other best friend, my male best friend.
Thank you.
I came back from Toronto, and then we found a place we moved out. So that fixed the house situation, because I didn't just spend all day inside for fear of talking to my siblings.
And then you moved that into the assets column.
Yeah, so that was another thing to move into the assets. And, I gradually did this for all this stuff, for exercise, picked up a gym membership and stuff, and just started doing a little bit more things. And then all of a sudden, if I look at my assets and liabilities now, I mean, finances are always going to be a problem, and savings suck, but the other stuff is really good. And then looking at that, I feel so much better about where I'm at. So that was like the overarching thing. I mean, there's going to be systemic problems that anyone has that you need to address if you're feeling depressed for longer than, a couple of weeks. Mm-hmm. Because if it's a couple of months, there's stuff happening. I'm not saying you're doing it, but there's stuff that needs to be acknowledged, because everyone has bad days, and that's understandable, but they should just be a day.
Yeah.
So any longer term stuff. And then in the short term, that was kind of a long term thing. In the short term, I kind of started thinking about things that I really like. And this is kind of dorky, but there's a lot of things you could do. Oh my God, I sing like all the time. I love it so much. I'm obsessed with Hamilton. I love it so much. Another good thing I realized is like obviously exercise, but oh man, listening to music that is not like pop music or hip hop stuff. I listen to like soundtracks from movies I used to love as a kid all the time. They're so good. I mean, do you know how hard Phil Collins went on the Tarzan soundtrack?
Oh.
So good. And it reminds me of all that stuff when I was a kid. And like, just listening to that kind of music, I wanted to bring up the idea of there's like your physical diet, and then there's your whole other diet, what you're intaking based on your friendships and interactions and music. I mean, if you're in a down place, you're not going to be helped by listening to depressing music. As much as we want to wallow, it's not going to help.
It's not productive.
Yeah, you can, force yourself to laugh, and unfortunately, it sounds bad to force yourself to do anything, but you can force yourself to smile, and your brain's a dum-dum. It's just a fancy chip. It is. You can trick yourself into making yourself feel a bit better, and there's stuff you can do just to kind of bring yourself up. I don't recommend, faking your whole life, but you can fake it till you make it a little bit. You can try smiling a little bit. Positive self-affirmations for me were a big thing, because I realized from other stuff that had happened in my life, I really just didn't have a good feeling of self-worth and the self-reflection. So little things now can help me out, that I would just kind of say to myself to fill in the 3 main areas that I've figured out, which is to do with abandonment stuff, and the idea that, I don't know, people might not want to be near me, so I can say stuff to that. I can speak to the idea that I'm not some ugga-bug running around in track pants all day. So, and those kind of things do help. I mean, we have the idea of negative self-talk, that inner critical voice that gets brought up a lot in psychology, which mindfulness feeds into. If you're in your head, you might be around negative people your entire life, or positive people, but you're around you 100% of the time. And if you are negative to yourself 100% of the time, you've just got like a bully or a mean person with you all the time, and that's going to take a toll.
Yeah.
So being aware of the inner critical voice, you can check in with mindfulness and see if you're actually being fair to yourself.
Yeah.
If you're being patient with yourself and understanding, or if you're just being mean and belittling yourself, that's something that needs to be addressed, and you can replace that with a more positive, critical voice. How would you speak on this issue if it was a friend, or how would a loved one speak to you about it? And you can get a pretty good understanding of comparing those two, because a lot of times
I think
we're
that's
way harder.
that's such a good comparison, because like quite often I'll catch myself thinking like that, and I've not even realized like I'm doing it. But then I think like if my mum had said that to me, I'd be devastated.
Oh yeah, if I don't want to drop her name, but if the big W said that to you, oh mama, that would be so mean. Your mum's lovely. Shout out to Alana's mum. I know you're listening. Wendito. No, I gotta stop doing that.
You gotta stop doing that.
She's so good. Anyway, but like it's really useful to think about that kind of stuff. That was a big problem. That was a really big problem. And then to even go on like the smaller scale, that positive self-talk, there's even ways that can be more effectual. I noticed, I read an article that was talking about how it's better to say, you can do it over I can do it.
Oh,
do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because you can do it makes your brain think that someone's saying it to you, and it works. It totally works.
Yeah.
So there's a bunch of little stuff like that. I find I got a big propensity to try and want to get a lot of stuff done at once, which is dumb, but sometimes that kind of stuff can help. Like I'll double up in a way that's beneficial. I'll listen to readings or YouTube videos on my uni study whilst I'm at the gym. And I would have thought that wouldn't help out because I'd feel like I'm boring myself, but I feel like I'm getting so much done.
Yeah, you're being extra productive.
You're lifting weights and you'll be listening to something. You're just like, oh, I'm the smartest man alive. You're like Superman. You're like, I couldn't be any better.
Yeah.
Which, works really well. And sometimes, you can burn out by trying to do too much at once, but that kind of stuff feels really good. I noticed. I
guess it's personal. It's what works for you. You know, like right now, you're not telling people every time you're at the gym, you better be listening to a lecture. You better be doing this. So you better be doing that. Like this is just what works for you.
Do a little bit, and as far as the stuff you can do to check in, another really good thing that I do. Have a hobby. Obviously have a hobby. Like I knit and I ice skate and I do a bunch of dumb stuff.
You do knit. I have a
scarf.
scarf.
I do knit. Yeah, she does. I love doing this kind of stuff. And if you need a personal day, like take a personal day.
Yeah.
Don't feel bad. We have this idea that, I don't want to let my team down at work. You don't owe them anything. You're in a capitalist society. Rise up, comrades. Take a day for yourself. Anyway, I don't know. If you're sick, be sick, and just be patient with yourself and understanding.
Let yourself take the time to feel better.
Yeah, like a lot of times if I feel bad about something or feel bored about, I'll compare it to something I do like. Like there's times when you're just lethargic and you're just down. But what I'll do is compare what I need to do against something that I know I really like ice skating or something. And if I feel bad, like if I'm like, oh, I feel so bad today, and then I think about ice skating, and if I feel bad about ice skating, I know I'm in a mood.
Yeah.
Because I know I love ice skating. So you can write down a bunch of stuff you absolutely love and then check through that and go, if I really hate that, then I'll. Another thing is, working for other people. And if you feel down, I find the times when I've been kind of the nicest to people is when I'm kind of down, because you don't want others to feel how you feel. So you kind of work, and that distraction can be useful because it's a useful goal. So you can do stuff for your friends. I like to write up a bunch of friends' names and I'll put them in a box, and you pick one out when you're feeling down. You'd be like, oh, I'll buy that person coffee or something.
Okay.
Yeah, you can do stuff.
I've never had a coffee, but okay.
No, you haven't. Oh no, you make it into the bucket now. No, okay. No, we went shopping. I was the only one that bought clothes, but still.
That's still.
I bought you bucking ball. No.
We did. We had chips.
Yeah. So there's so much. I know. I don't know. There's so much here. If anyone's listening wants to just chat, you can totally message me afterwards. There's so much. I have too much advice
Colin
and I follow
comedy.
none of it. Yeah. You can, no, you totally can. But I don't know. I hope some people get some tips out of this.
I think what I like most about the things that you've spoken about is that whether you're at the extreme end of feeling bad about yourself and not coping, or like you have just had a bad day and you aren't feeling too great in that moment, like the things that you said are just applicable to everyone and anyone. Like, essentially your basic advice is like, if you're feeling bad, try to recognize it and change it by doing the things you like. Yeah. By being a little bit more mindful. And
if you can't, then be patient with yourself. That's the big thing. I have such a drive to like, oh no, I should be getting good results right now, and that's just not how your body works. This whole process to get to where I'm at now didn't take a month or a year. It took like 10 years plus. Like this were the time scale. That's what I wanted to talk to you about. It was a long time, and things got a little bit better, and the overall trend was better, but it took a while. So just be really patient, and it sucks. It's like getting over a breakup. Like it's not I want to be over in a week. That's just not realistic. And there's one final thing I can say that took me so long to realize I'm such a dum-dum. If you have any problems in life, just Google it. Oh my God. we forget this. Like, we have an opportunity that none of our parents or grandparents had. We have the entire cumulative wealth of human knowledge from mankind at our disposals.
Yeah.
And I never
It's in
thought,
your pocket on your phone.
I didn't know that was a real thing. But now, even today, I was like, oh, why do I feel so tired in the morning? And then Google was like, here's everything. And I was like, thanks, Google, take 5. I think it's so good. But yeah, so even the stuff about, like, if you can't afford a therapist or whatever, I would go online and I would kind of do this stuff myself.
Yeah.
There's checklists you can go through. There's articles you can read. You just do a little bit every day or a little bit when you can, and be forgiving on the days where you don't, and you will make progress.
That is just a really lovely thing to end on. I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your story.
That's okay.
Like, I've known you for so long now, and I'm going to have a little moment.
You can have a moment.
Yeah. Like, I'm so proud of, like, the change that you have made, and I've known you for so long, and I've seen how you were back then and how you are now, and, like, it's such a dramatic change, and I'm like, I can't tell you how happy I am for you and how proud I am of you.
You're just the sweetest person. I love you so much.
Oh, I love you.
It's crazy.
Guys, if you're listening and you want to give me any feedback, if you've got any questions for Colin, you can hit up YMCA WA's Facebook or Instagram, flick us a message, and I'd love to hear from you. But yeah, until then, I'll chat to you next time.
Bye.